Now, thinking is not the problem. I want to make that clear. We need to think. Thinking is part of what really allows us to be creative. It allows us to pursue spiritual explorations. It allows us to communicate. Thinking's great. And we overthink. We're addicted to thinking, and we don't know how to discern between the thoughts that actually allow us to keep on evolving and the thoughts that keep us trapped in small, fearful selves. So the problem is that when we're not present in our bodies and our hearts, our thoughts get hijacked by our limbic system. Many of you know we have a negativity bias. That means that we are inclined to fixate on what's wrong and what's missing. And if we're not embodied and present, that's the default. Our minds will be run by our fears. We will spend most of our time anxious and worrying and trying to busily figure out things way more than we actually need to work out problems. I mean, how many of you notice that you're kind of going around the day a lot of times, assuming there's a problem and trying to figure something out? Don't even bother raising your hands. It's okay. But you understand. So what happens is that overthinking, the way we do it, especially when it's run by fear, separates us. It separates us from our own hearts, and it separates us from each other. We feel like we're in our own little vacuum or silo, busily working out problems, and that something's wrong. It fuels the shadow on a global level. When on a global level, humans are overthinking and run by fear, we cause a lot of damage. Thinking tends to create hierarchies. Thinking creates separations. When we're run by fear, we live in hierarchies. We get caught in domination, mastery, control, making others inferior. So in a global way, our fear-based thinking ends up driving racism. It drives tribalism. It really leads to violating other humans and other non-human animals because we feel like they're less than us and violating the earth. And I say this, and that might all sound abstract, but consider this. If someone's really in their body and feeling what's going on inside them and willing to open to their fears and willing to bring presence to what's difficult, there's a natural compassion that then can extend to the world around them. When we're in our bodies, we feel more of the natural world around us. We feel more belonging. We want to take care. We can see the shadow in our daily life, too. When we're not present, we can see how our anxiety creates a sense of separation, and the more we worry, plan, obsess, the less we're able to be intimate. So I'll speak for myself here because, and I shared this at some point, I think last year, I became aware that for quite a while when my son would call me, I would be in front of my computer screen, and as we were talking, I'd be kind of deleting emails that I could get rid of and doing little busy work and sometimes writing checks out and so on. And then started noticing I'd get off the call and feel this kind of slumping sense of, oh my gosh, this is my son, I love him. Why was I multitasking? Why couldn't I just be there? Now, of course, being completely transparent, he only calls me when he's driving from place to place, so he's multitasking too. But it really has, there were a few rounds where I really felt some angst around it, and it actually has shifted how I pay attention. We need to think, but when we're addicted, we vacate the premises. We're not really able to be intimate with our life. It creates a trance. This is Annie Lamott, the writer. She says, "My mind is my main problem almost all the time. I wish I could leave it in the fridge when I go out, but it likes to come with me." So when we're in trance, when we're in the trance of thinking, we lose the freshness and spontaneity and creativity that's really who we are. George Carlin says, do you ever get that strange feeling of vuja day? This is not deja vu, vuja day. It's a distinct sense that somehow something just happened that has never happened before. Nothing seems familiar, and then suddenly the feeling's gone. Vuja day. Okay, so we're setting up the challenge, and the challenge is a deep habituation to leaving our bodies and being lost in thought beyond the usefulness of thought. And I suspect if I did a survey, most of us would confess to falling in that category of often thought more than is beneficial. So, reconnecting. And we're going to emphasize two main ways. We're going to talk about reconnecting when we're caught in the trance in daily life, and the reconnecting that a daily practice of meditation fosters. It inclines us more to come back to our body. How do we pay attention to the waves of what are arising in us in a way that really awakens us from that sense of separate self, that reveals the ocean, the awake awareness, the loving presence that's our deepest nature? The signal to pay attention to the waves is usually discontent, restlessness, some form of suffering. And it might be slight or it might be more severe, that it's a sense of not okay. Something's missing, something's wrong. And sometimes it's really gripping, as in when we're gripped by fear or jealousy or anger. Sometimes the signal is just obsessive thinking, or it might be numbness with an undercurrent of anxiety. But something lets us know, oh, okay, there are waves going on and there's some identification with them. Whenever you're suffering, the message is that you're living in too small an identity. It's, I think of often like the caterpillar in a cocoon, that we're meant to keep growing, enlarging our sense of who we are. And when we get caught in the egoic self and preoccupy with the egoic self, the fears and the wants, it's like an arrested development where it's part of what naturally unfolds for us humans. And we're meant to keep growing. And when we don't keep growing, then it's that feeling of a cocoon, like we're caught in something. And you might even notice that you can sense in that this kind of intuitive experience of there's something more, there's a larger space to live in. Here's a poem by the poet Tukaram that I really find delightful. I was meditating with my cat the other day, and all of a sudden she shouted, "What happened?" I knew exactly what she meant, but encouraged her to say more, feeling that if she got it all out on the table, she would sleep better that night. So I responded, "Tell me more, dear." And she soulfully meowed, "Well, I was mingled with the sky. I was comets whizzing here and there. I was suns and heat. Hell, I was galaxies. But now look, I am landlocked in fur." To this, I said, "I know exactly what you mean." What to say about conversation between mystics? So landlocked in fur. And it happens, when we're caught tossed in the waves and reactive in that separate sense of self. So that's when we start right where we are and deepen attention and bring those waves of experience into the light of awareness. So we'll look at that, how we do that, and we'll focus on first the waves of thoughts and then the waves of emotion, and how with each we can wake up to a larger sense of our being. So incessant thinking. There's one master who was asked to describe the world, and his response was, lost in thought. And we know it. We can sense if you look just in this last day and sense the huge swaths of time that perhaps you were in a virtual reality, not in your senses. And that virtual reality, the continuing rolling through of thoughts, actually keeps us locked and arrested in a sense of separate self. One master was asked to describe the world, and his response was, lost in thought. And we know it. We spend so much time in a virtual reality and lose contact with our senses. You might just think about today and sense the kind of swaths of time that you're thinking versus being here in a kind of wakeful, present way. This is Carlos Castaneda. He writes, you talk to yourself too much. You're not unique in that. Every one of us does. We maintain our world with our inner dialogue. A man or woman of knowledge is aware that the world will change completely as soon as they stop talking to themselves. Our ongoing thoughts, our beliefs actually fuel a trance of not just a separate self, but a deficient self, a threatened self. And as we know, anxiety, uh, anxious worry, planning, figuring out, these are primary survival tools of our ego. We're very addicted to them and they lock us in. I often think of this when, this comes to mind a lot. This came to mind a lot when we had our dog Hakuna, Jonathan's dog. Hakuna is this royal standard poodle, and I would take him walking a lot. And it was a lot of, he just was so happy. He'd go around, sniffing everything, his tail wagging. And then now and then the Akitas that also lived in the neighborhood would appear. And of course, I started feeling dread because I'd have to wrap his leash around the tree and hold on. He weighed more than me, and he would get ferocious and growl and tug and bark, and then they'd be out of sight, and abruptly it was all over, and he'd go back to being fine again, sniffing and wagging his tail and enjoying everything. And I think about how with humans, we would have kept fueling the fight with stories in our mind. Those damn Akitas, who do they think they are? The nerve, they're in my neighborhood. Can't trust them for anything. They'll do it again. I'm going to teach them a lesson. We could just go on and on with, with the battle. Him, it was history. And we just get hooked. And even when there's nothing particular going on to trigger us, there's a default network in our brain that produces all sorts of thoughts to keep us ready and vigilant, that just keeps on resurrecting that sense of a separate self where something's missing and something's wrong. And of course, the thoughts we most regularly focus on are moi, me. There's that story of a guy in a bar and he's saying, I know I'm nothing, but I'm all I can think about. And unfortunately, these waves of self-centered thinking, how can I get more comfortable? What am I doing wrong? How's this situation going to affect me? They blind us to the larger world. This is Pema Chodron. She says, being preoccupied with ourself, with our self-image, it's like being deaf and blind. It's like standing in the middle of a vast field of wildfire flowers with a black hood over our head. It's like coming upon a tree of singing birds while wearing earplugs. So the challenge of waking up from these thoughts is that we actually take them to be reality. We believe what we're thinking. They shape our entire experience. I like the image of a caterpillar in a cocoon and how natural it is to be in the caterpillar phase and be living in the what we'll call the egoic identity, where we're reacting and protecting and doing those things. And it's developmentally natural to evolve to a larger wholeness, to the butterfly that has the freedom of a much larger space. So dukkha is the pressure of the cocoon saying, it's time. We need to inhabit a larger being. It's time to let go. There's more to experience. And that, of course, requires awareness, letting go of clinging to it's not so easy because it's familiar. A cocoon is familiar and safe. And the cocoon is our habitual thinking, and the cocoon is our judgment. It's painful. And dukkha is saying, it's time to open into the mystery. I'm spending time on this, on dukkha, on suffering, anger, fear, because it's not bad. It's not a mistake. Let dukkha be our signal, our calling to let go of the obsessive thinking and the limiting beliefs and the resistance to the feelings, the armoring in the heart. Let go into a bigger reality. Okay, friends, so for the remainder of this, we're going to talk about how meditation can help us undo the clench, the fearful ego, and open more into a larger beingness. And today, as I mentioned, we're doing this in several parts. The key focus will be letting go of our obsessive thinking, our fixation on thoughts. And this is a critical primary domain. And the reason is thinking is our major strategy of control. And we spend huge amounts of time in our mental control tower, worrying, planning, rehearsing, preparing, navigating to protect and further the egoic self. You know how when we're in traffic, everyone else is the traffic? It's like we're living inside a home video, incessant inner dialogue. And of course, the main protagonist is moi, might be extended to moi and moi's close kin, but it's moi, my concerns. What is happening to me? That's the main theme, what we're worried about, how others are treating me, what needs to get done. This is the movie we're in, and we're holding on to it. There is clinging to this movie. There's uh, one of my favorite little comic strip cartoons is this man in a bar, and he's talking to the bartender, and he just says, I know I'm nothing, but I'm all I can think about. And it's so understandable. We're addicted and we're hooked on thinking, and we believe our thoughts. I mean, consider today for a moment. Just let yourself kind of review the day for a moment and just notice, how much were you inside that movie? Lost in thoughts, all centering around, organized around, swirling around self. You've probably noticed that our inner dialogue is not only incessant and self-focused, our thoughts are incredibly repetitive. I mean, I read somewhere that we have 60,000 thoughts a day, and 98% of them we had yesterday. You know, in another cartoon, you see a man on a highway and he's about to enter a desert. And the sign says, "You and your own tedious thoughts, next 500 miles." So, the key challenge with this ongoing movie um, is that because evolution has rigged us to control by being vigilant about potential threats, because we have that negativity bias, most of our thoughts are worry thoughts, judgment. Our thoughts perpetuate an atmosphere of tension and fear, the clutched fist. Evolution also rigged us to meet our needs, and we get habituated to thoughts about what's missing, what more we want and need. So that's craving and fantasy, and that's also the tension of a clutched fist. So the Buddha taught that whatever a person frequently thinks and reflects on, that will become the inclination of their mind.